thought I was going to go in there and be a bunch of athletes and, people looked fit, and it was everyone in their 70s.
Yeah.
Like
Again,
people like walking with canes and all this. And I was like, am I at a senior care thing? Like, I was like,
it's true, but again, that when we talk about the side sleepers for the shoulder, right? And the 50 to 60, 70-year-old side sleeper. But also, too, that's the other interesting thing. A lot of people think that these orthopedic surgeons make their money on the athletes. They don't. They make their living on the layperson.
Yeah, only like the super specialized, like well-known, almost famous surgeons do, like athletes only. And they, there was a guy, and he was who I was going to see, but insurance didn't want to cover him for some stupid reason. They'd only...
Remember, he was on your plan, but he
wasn't.
wasn't.
On my plan, but he was at the wrong hospital. It's just a whole joke. And then that hospital was actually bought by the hospital they do cover like a year before.
That was UAB St. Vincent's.
Yeah, it was a whole joke. But he ended up leaving to go do the Olympic snowboarding and ski team in Colorado. And that was,
Well, they find that specialty out there, but they're still going to, a lot of them are still, and now, of course, if they're busy enough, full enough, sure they will. And they'll charge nicely for it. But I think I would say probably 75% of the physicians who come out are doing shoulders and knees and hips on the non-athlete, I guess, right? Mm-hmm. Speaking of that, man, I've got a left SI joint. What got me into chiropractic 45 years ago flared up on me yesterday. I got it adjusted, some better, but I need to get back in there today to get it again corrected because it's leg day.
Stop on the way home.
Leg day, yeah. Well, on the way down to here, I'll go by and get adjusted again. But no leg day when the SI joint's out. You know how that is.
Yeah.
We're working on yours, right?
Yeah.
So like I said, and I've mentioned this before, 80% of all back problems start there, right? And that's what got me to my first chiropractor. So it flared up the other day. And again, what did I do? I didn't have an ouch moment, It just, I don't know. Probably the way I was sitting. But, hey, let's roll into a topic that came to mind this past weekend when I was at a symposium, sort of a seminar with a lot of the top nutrition-based physicians in the Southeast this past weekend. And we were talking about a couple of different topics. And something came to mind that I thought would be a great thing for us to discuss on this episode of Flip the Script, SCRIP.
Drop the T.
Drop the T. I like it. With Cameron and Chris. And let's discuss two products today from what I consider probably the two top nutrition-based companies in America. My 35-plus years of practice, these are the two that I use the most frequent in my clinic, over 80% of the time. And I thought, of these two companies, what are the two top selling, most frequently sold products that they're selling? What conditions are they treating? And it didn't really blow me away because we talk about these two in these podcasts probably as much as anything that we talk about. But let's go over those two. Let's start with standard process. You hear a lot about it. We talk about a lot on this podcast. I consider them probably the elite that I've used over the last 35 years. Their top selling product in the United States. Now, this is a company that comes out of Wisconsin. Everything is organic. Most of their product, they actually grow on the farm themselves. Their number one product that they're selling in this country is called Drenamin, which is a product, a food supplement for the adrenal glands. Like I write in my first book, Light Your Fire, again, it's not show me somebody who is stressed in this country, show me somebody who's not. So that just speaks volumes. If this company has been around 95 plus years, this is the product that is number one selling probably for the last 10 years. And it makes sense to us because we know how stress is affecting this entire country. And I remember I asked you on podcast, who's talking about it, right? And I think you Googled up maybe two other doctors who have discussed it.
2 episodes. Peter T is super well known. He had one or two. I think he had one on it, and then I saw someone else named Mark Hyman. They're both MDs. They each had one, but the rest there was nothing else. Right. It was like just like e-learning videos explaining like what it does, but there's no podcast like this really talking about it.
So think about it. You've got again, something that affects 90% of this population easily. And most people couldn't even tell you where the adrenal glands are located in the body. They sit above the kidneys. Their job is to regulate stress, physical, emotional, and it's not taught in medical school because there's not an insurance code to bill for it. Now, full-blown adrenal fatigue or exhaustion is Addison's disease, and that will kill you. Okay? So then they start getting busy, and then they have a protocol for it, which is basically anti-inflammatories, prednisone.
Why?
And, well, because, again, they're going to treat the symptom of the full-blown exhaustion once it gets to that particular point, once it's identifiable, and they have something they can get reimbursed with. Now, they have a drug for that, prednisone being one of them. And then, of course, the other, I kid you not, if you Google the treatment, or if you look it up in the Merck manual for Addison's disease, it is find a way to eliminate your stress. And then seriously life-altering, depleting, if you will, anti-inflammatories such as prednisone.
So why do they do anti-inflammatories for that? Like, how does that even work?
Well, because if you think about what is the adrenals, what happens with them when the adrenals are stimulated, cortisol, right? They regulate the inflammation within the body. And the elevated cortisol creates the inflammatory responses and creates the damage that's done within the body when it gets above that desired minimum, if you will. So keeping cortisol in check, that's your pro-inflammatory. Anytime you have any issue that's aggravating you associated with inflammation, whether it's a joint, the gut, IBS, for example, brain disorder, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, when cortisol is elevated, you throw gas on the fire of any pre-existing inflammatory situation. But again, since it's not being covered in insurance companies, most university, medical, and pre-med school classes are not teaching adrenal fatigue, which again, we have a product from probably the top nutrition-based supplement company in the country. Their number one selling product is just for that. Again, not follow the money, but follow the sales. This is what we're treating probably the largest percentage of in patients. And I know it's true with my patients. My patients, I start them off with what's known as a symptom survey. And in that symptom survey, we have different parts of the endocrine system, the body, that we're evaluating. And I tell you, 80% of the time, the adrenals are the number one problem I'm dealing with. Thyroid being second. But like I said also in a lot of my podcasts, the adrenals will steal from the thyroid, and they will also steal from the testes as well, like the ovaries in women. Yes, which is where that complication is associated with perimenopause and menopause. When the adrenals are functioning the way they're supposed to, then the transition is not as difficult. But again, in our country, the amount of stress that people are dealing with, including the women. You can see why they don't transcend from that transition from the ovaries to the adrenal glands. And we see a lot of menopause-related stress problems associated with women. I would say 80% plus. It's very rare for a woman to actually, these days, to be able to go through that change without experiencing those symptoms that are very frustrating, to say the very least.
So that it's not intended for you to menopause to be as insufferable as...
Well, let's just say not intended. It's this way. The adrenals are supposed to take over once the ovaries exhaustion starts to occur. They're supposed to help the body with the regulation of the estrogens, right? But in a society where ours are burned out due to stress, because again, we're not handling stress. We don't cope with stress well in our society. And that, again, you were talking about the cortisol and the inflammation associated with the release of that. Then you look over to MediHerb, the other, in my opinion, probably the best herb company in the world, if not the Milky Way. These guys set the bar height probably, well, let's just say these guys are amazing. MediHerb comes out of Australia, all right? Their number one selling product here in the United States is turmeric for inflammation. So again, a correlation here. We're talking about the inflammation associated with the raising cortisol from the adrenals, and then inflammation that we're treating here in our country. And we talked about that too. The anti-inflammatories, the total anti-inflammatories that are sold in America trump that sold in the world. So we buy more anti-inflammatories in this country than the world does combined. Because we're all inflamed. We're all inflamed and we all have burnt out adrenal glands. So again, here's two areas that are also associated with metabolic related issues, right? So if we talk about inflammation, where do you start? Start with the gut, right? So you and I have talked about this many times. The two major situations that I find in my practice are adrenal problems and gut problems. It starts with the gut. So it's food. Metabolic, surprisingly, no. So when we have an herb that's being sold here for, and we also talked about the correlation between all the shoulder problems, knee problems, hip problems, and all that inflammation associated with that. But when you look at something like irritable bowel syndrome, that's an inflammation-related issue, which is also very prominent in people who don't tolerate stress very well.
Yeah,
don't
my buddies all the time are like, dude, my stomach's killing me. I'm about to, and I'm like, I never feel that way.
But didn't you have an issue with that when you were younger?
No, it was stomach ulcers.
Well,
from
ulcers.
Stress.
There I'm talking about.
Extreme.
All right, ulcers are
yeah.
extreme cases of inflammation, right?
Yeah.
Again, associated with stress. There you are, Cameron. You went through it yourself, and this was in high school, right?
Yeah, it's early high school.
So see how it's affecting everybody. But then again, look to the food that we're consuming, the omega-6. Remember, we talked about the omega-6s and omega-3s in the body. And 3s are things like fish oil, flaxseed oil. Olive oil is another good source of that. These are anti-inflammatory foods. Fish is anti-inflammatory. Meats are anti-inflammatory. So anything we put in our body is going to be either inflammatory food or anti-inflammatory. The most inflamed foods, and you can Google these, and there's a great book out. I can't remember the name of her right now, but it's something like the inflammation-free diet or something like that. Good book. Has probably been out 20 years. And she basically, I don't know where she found the time, but she went through and she basically, every piece of food that I know of, she's got it rated in its glycemic index, its inflammation.
Like out of 10 or something, or 100?
Well, out of hundreds, like, for example. Like, so let's say if you're negative 500, like salmon would be, that's anti-inflammatory. Positive 300, which would be an example of what wheat bread would be. That's pro-inflammatory. So she's gone through, but you can probably Google these same foods. If you wanted to Google your foods and find out where they lie on the glycemic index level, will give you an idea of inflammation. Something with a high glycemic index is going to be rather inflammatory. Sugar, for example, but wheat bread is one of the highest. So in our diet today, and we talked about this in the last podcast when we went into what were the top foods since the 1930s, and certainly over the last 60 years has been what? wheat, pasta, white rice, and sugar, all pro-inflammatory. So now it makes sense why we have so many joint-related issues. So many people are running around popping anti-inflammatories like, well, the M&M junkies, right?
Yeah.
So the correlation between two. But also what says volumes is that two of these top-selling supplement companies in the world, these are their two top-selling products. Enough said, really. If you ask me, if this is what Joe Public is buying, a support for the adrenals, Drenamin is simply, basically, I consider it food for the adrenal glands. All right, it's unique in its high volume of the whole vitamin C food complex. The magnesium and other minerals so vital to the adrenal glands, and then the isolated, almost glandular type support for the gland itself with these nucleoproteins that are in the product. So, I mean, we can talk forever on these two things, but I think that when you look at top nutrition companies, their two number one selling products in this world are for inflammation and for adrenal support, stress gland support. That speaks volumes. Clear the fog out of the way. Here's two major problems, and they're connected. And what are they connected to? They're really connected to our diet again. Metabolical issues, too much inflammatory food going into our body, not enough anti-inflammatory food, way too much knee, hip, and shoulder surgery going on today compared to 60 years ago. So it's not rocket science. Again, it's common sense. I love some common sense.
I think that's why the carnivore diet's gotten so big, because it gets rid of like all the inflammation, and so
follow anybody on social media that talks about it, and that's what they'll talk about, right?
I know it's extreme,
joint pain, knee pain, shoulder pain.
Yeah.
It's extreme. Hey, if you went back a couple thousand years ago, that was your only choice, pal. Okay.
You didn't have time to grow no wheat.
That's right. And you didn't have time for a knee to blow out when you were running from that saber tooth or chasing that gazelle, right? So, and again, we talked about the Perfect American Diet, Perfect Human Diet, the book that was out.
Yeah.
And that's actually, it's a documentary. And that's what it is, man. It's fat and protein. But we are carved out junkies, and we're paying for it now big time. Because when you look at the adrenal glands, once they get burned out, a lot of what we call the weeping syndrome. When they get burned out enough, people actually just come to tears for no apparent reason. And I get it. I mean, I have patience. Women are more likely to admit this than men are, right? But this is kind of, and if you understand why so many of them get to this position, because once these adrenals get burned out, which is a key precursor to all these autonomic disorders, right? The autonomic disorders have two major things in common, and that is a leaky gut problem and a burned out adrenal system, inability to cope with the stress associated with it. And what do they do in our society with these people? Well, they put them on antidepressants because that's all they got. Well, of course they're depressed. They're over there crying in the corner for no reason whatsoever, or in the middle of the day. It's called the weeping syndrome. This is a sign that your adrenals have issues, but good luck trying to find a doctor who treats them. So that's a good point. These adrenals have to be tested ideally with saliva testing, because you have 4 different rhythms through the day. And unless you're drawing blood 4 times a day, which nobody is going to do, maybe twice if you're lucky, right? But most of the time when you go in, if they do even test the adrenals, they're going to test your cortisol level with the blood by drawing the blood. Well, if 4 different rhythms through the day, and at that one time of the day you go in and your rhythm might be within a normal curve, but the other 3 are off, then you are adrenal insufficient. It only takes one of those 4 through the day to be off. That's why we like to do the saliva. So find you a doctor who understands what's known as the HPA axis. Again, something that you can Google, but you'd be surprised how few understand the connection between the hypothalamus, the pituitary and the adrenal. That's where we have to start to correct the whole problem. We start there in the limbic system, which is the, again, pleasure regulator of the body, right? So you need to find somebody. We call them ASI testing, saliva tests, where you're going to actually take your saliva 4 different times of the day, and then you put it into a tube. We send them off, and we evaluate it that way. That is, in my opinion, of 30 plus years of studying these adrenals, the most precise way to determine where you need help. Okay. And this is the person who wakes up in the morning just as tired as they went to bed, the person who has difficulty staying asleep through the night, and again, the person that just hits the wall and crashes, no more energy by early afternoon. These are just some of the clinical signs. Inflammation of any sort is also another clinical sign of an adrenal issue, right? So, and then ability to handle stress, which is, so like I said, it's not a case of you're going to be able to find stress-free world here today. No. So do that, and also look to the gut. But that's what I wanted to touch on, because that hit this weekend when I was out with the group of some of the top, like I said, the nutrition-based physicians. And that topic came to my mind, and I said, I want to talk about that. Look it up, and that's what I found. Cool stuff.
Yeah,
I think so. I don't know, but
and what was the standard process supplement?
It's called Drenamin.
Drenamin. You know what all I take? Is that something that I would get enough of certain things that are already in that, or do you think that's something I should order?
Well, again, because if you're looking at now as overall tonic for the adrenals, it's great for everybody. Can everybody benefit from that? Well, I think everybody's got an adrenal issue. So yes, now you do a lot more than the average Joe does to help to alleviate that with you're getting out and getting some exercise, getting some endorphins released.
A lot of fish oils and
yes, and you're using a lot of anti-inflammatory diet, which helps a lot, right? But yes, there's still the stress of coping with stress. There are some very good adrenal tonics in the herb family, which are great. You consume magnesium daily, which also very beneficial to you. You have good source of vitamin C, whole food vitamin C in your diet. So they're getting some of the nutrients they need over probably the majority of the population. But this is one of those things that you can low dose that work beautifully over time. Some of my patients, when I put them on the Drenamin, they may be on it for a month or two, and if they run out of the particular product, they can almost tell immediately that there's a change in the way they're coping with their stress. Now, it doesn't mean you're on it for a lifetime, but it means this is how these glands, they take a while to rebuild, because literally we have to rebuild them, the damage that's been done. And a lot of times, this particular patient I was talking about with that particular situation, she was in her 70s, and she started the protocol about 4 months ago. She's dropped 40 pounds over that period, 6 months, around April. 40 pounds off. Her energy is back. She had an issue with the weeping that I was talking about. She just didn't. She was an active person her whole life, and she was just, that's what was frustrating her the most, is she had difficulty keeping up with her, what she called her old self. And a lot of these symptoms, she was one of those typical of some adrenal issues that they are burned out, but they continue to run sort of like that energized bunny until they hit a wall. Boom. So amped up, but stressed out. They fail to calm, right? A lot of people have difficulty calming down, have difficulty getting to sleep. She was going to bed at 11, sometimes not falling asleep till 1, and then waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning just as tired as she went to bed. These are classical symptoms. So the turnaround was great. Another product that I put her on was that Cataplex B Core. Man, that's an adrenal supporter as well.
That just reminded me, I'm out of magnesium, and Mom was like, or Easy Mag, and she's like, you need anything? And I was like, no, but I thought there was something, but I was like, I guess there's not, and it was that. That's what it was.
Yeah, and adrenals love magnesium, and especially, the organic form of magnesium the best. So, yeah, so you're supplying a lot of those nutrients that they need, but most of us are not, because again, green leafies is what we're talking about. So you see, in a society where we're not really getting green leafies, and if we are, we're not getting the organic form of them, most people. So these glands are starving, right? And again, because they're not studied and most of your doctors won't talk about it, people Google the adrenal glands, look up the adrenal glands, see what they do. See if some of the symptoms of a weak adrenal does not sound like something you're dealing with. And then find you a physician who understands. Another great thing to Google and check out, what's known as the HPAA/axis. Probably been coming into mainstream here maybe over the last 10 years. So not a lot of physicians are privy to this. Google it, check it out yourself. Try to find you a physician in your area that knows how to study these and test for the function of these, because there's another direct correlation with the adrenals always and DHEA, the precursor to all hormones as well. DHEA goes low, depression goes up, and vice versa. So when you're addressing the adrenals, you're also going to be addressing the DHEA levels within the body as well. Powerful stuff. So, man, that's a lot.
Remind them to stay consciously aware
of your awareness
of
consciousness. All right, and as we like to say there, Chris, boom. Anything else you want to add before I go?
I was going to say something about how
Nicely
Coke,
done on that.
How Coke announced that they're going to be selling Mexican Coke, which is just Coke with cane sugar instead of corn syrup.
Well, that's a great place to start. Now they're going to be selling it in our country, right? But they're going to be selling both of them, you told me?
Yeah, I think it'll be glass bottles.
People, glass bottles? That might be our clue, the old glass bottles back in. Okay.
Still check it just to make sure. But.
And, so...
Because some places already sell it, but...
Now, are they going to make us pay more for a product
It'll be the same price,
more...
but less volume. The bottles are small.
Oh, really? So they're going to downsize the bottles.
I saw it the other
You're not going to get as much, but you're going to get a form of sugar that the body can handle much better, right?
Right.
Instead of the high fructose corn syrup, which the liver doesn't break down for like a month or 45 days. But they're going to... so again... There's a disincentive to purchase it because it's going to cost you a little bit more. God,
There's a guy that's the wrestling coach at my jiu-jitsu gym.
Corporate America.
And in between rounds, he'll go outside and smoke a cigarette and drink a Coke. And so it's not like he's super health conscious or anything. And he's always drinking the glass bottles. And someone's like, "What's with that?" And he was like, "It's Mexican Coke, dude. I'm not drinking that other crap. It's terrible for you."
White press on the cigarette.
Yeah, he was
that crap.
He was like, "I ain't drinking that crap, dude. It's terrible for you. You know that stuff will kill you, right?" And I'm like, just dying.
There's another case of a guy who's fit, perhaps, right? Well, his health, he could probably work a little bit on that.
It was so funny. It was so funny. And he loves them. He drinks like many a day. But he will only drink the cane sugar ones. He will not touch the corn syrup.
Well, the cane sugar tends to has an enzyme in it that's a little easier on the system to break down for utilization, right? It stays in the system for a shorter period of time. Yeah. So, and that's the thing about real sugar, but nobody does real sugar anymore because that's the way God put it out there with the enzymes. But we had to take that out and bleach it, make it pretty and white and cheap, and a death sentence if you consume them long enough, right? Good point. All right, brother. So with that one here, let's sign out for now because that was, some good stuff. Hopefully it's beneficial. Get your adrenals checked, people. Yes. Start there. It's amazing what it'll do for the rest of your health because the connection's there with the gut as well, which is, again, you can turn to for just about everything that's health related. So, until next time, have yourself a great day.
You ain't missing one.
Thank you. All right, brothers.